Tracy here at WTAJ News in Altoona. I'm joined by Jeff Bardos, former Senate candidate and campaign co-chair of Dr. Oz's campaign. We also have Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, who also ran for the Senate. And they're both here with me this evening, and I really appreciate you both being here.
Great to be here in Blair County.
Happy to do it. Anytime.
So, man, the debate has happened, came and went, felt like it went really quickly.
That is right. It really re-entrenched the status quo. You saw a lot of, the talking points that Pennsylvanians have been seeing on ads over and over again. John really hammering Dr. Oz on his refusal. I think I counted 3 times. He refused to answer yes or no whether or not he supported Lindsey Graham's abortion ban bill. John calling him to task for his misrepresentations. And I think we all heard the Oz rule. If Dr. Oz is on TV, we know that he's lying. We saw a lot of lying about John's record, but we knew this was going to be a format that wasn't going to be, the strongest format for John. But I think the fact that he was up there for an hour after, suffering the stroke that he did shows Pennsylvanians that he can do this job and that he's going to continue to get better. But Dr. Oz's positions are not going to get better. And I think that we saw that contrast here tonight.
Mr. Bardos, your key takeaways?
Well, first of all, the Eagles are going to win on Sunday. So I think we should get that out of the way, right?
On that we agree.
We're definitely going to agree on that. The Eagles are going to win on Sunday.
I plead the fifth on that, by the way, for the folks in Altoona. I will not answer that question.
Well, we were going to wear our Philly stuff tonight, too, but they didn't let us. All kidding aside, look, the ads, we're being inundated with $100 million worth of ads by both sides. It has been an orgy of negative advertising. And what we saw tonight, I think very clearly, Dr. Oz came to this debate with a clear, positive, optimistic vision for where Pennsylvania can be. He came back time and again to the very simple but very important premise that Joe Biden and the Democrats just can't, for whatever reason, get behind, which is Pennsylvania's energy bounty and our ability to take gas and other hydrocarbons out of the ground, pipe them all over the Commonwealth, all over the country, and get them on ships around the world to our allies overseas, neutralizes Russia, solves many foreign policy issues, helps Europe out of this disaster that they created for themselves. And what Dr. Oz, in a very powerful and I think a very positive way, pointed out is that we don't have to go down the path of a Germany or other European countries that decided to literally cut their own throats when it came to their energy independence. He knows that Pennsylvania's energy bounty can power not only the Commonwealth, but the nation forward with economic prosperity. And I think that there was this exchange about minimum wage, and that is such a left-wing sort of get stuck on this idea about a minimum wage. And what Dr. Oz talked about, I think very powerfully, was how good-paying jobs tied to a growing economy here in Pennsylvania is the way to lead everybody to a path to prosperity and dignity and good-paying jobs and keeping people here in the Commonwealth, which is why we do all this. We do this to move the Commonwealth forward.
So can I just say quickly, Jeff is trying his best to take one of Oz's flip-flop positions and really explain it for him. Here's the problem with Oz's answer on minimum wage. In one breath, he said John's aiming too low with saying that we should have a baseline minimum wage, that Pennsylvania should do what all of our neighbors, including West Virginia, by the way, has done to raise the minimum wage from the starvation level $7.25 wage. And then in another breath, he says he doesn't support raise the minimum wage, let the market take care of it. Clearly, the market has not taken care of it. We have seen corporate profits go through the roof. We've seen unemployment drop to the lowest levels, for Black Americans, for Hispanic Americans. We've seen unemployment drop. What we haven't seen is the same corresponding increase in real wages for Pennsylvanians, for American workers. And so Dr. Oz wants his corporate buddies who's funding his campaign to decide whether or not the work that Pennsylvanians do every single day is worth at least $15. I think he's wrong.
We're going to dive into the
no, but so we had that situation here in the United States just 3 short years ago. We had a booming economy, we had low inflation, and we had the largest real wage growth for men and women and young people starting out and trying to work their way up the economic ladder. We had the largest economic growth for those wage earners at the bottom quartile that we've seen in our nation's history. We had that 3 short years ago, but Joe Biden wasn't the president then, right? We had a different economic policy.
We're going to get into that.
Economic policy. And the country was booming.
We're going to get into that, but I want to start from the beginning here of this debate, where John Fetterman kind of addressed what was kind of the key elephant in the room with the closed captioning and his recovery from stroke. So let's hear from John Fetterman on that issue.
And let's also talk about the elephant in the room. I had a stroke. He's never let me forget that. And I might miss some words during this debate, mush 2 words together, but it knocked me down, but I'm going to keep coming back up. And this campaign is all about, to me, is about fighting for everyone in Pennsylvania that ever got knocked down, that needs to get back up, and fighting for all forgotten communities all across Pennsylvania that also got knocked down, that needs to get back up.
Thank you.
So obviously he addressed that there were going to be moments where he put some words together. There were some pauses tonight. So Mr. Kenyatta, let me start with you. How do you think John Fetterman fared in this debate?
You know, I will say that opening was, I think, emotional for everybody who's watching it, for all Pennsylvanians. You know, over half of Pennsylvanians are dealing with a chronic health issue. I assume that number jumps through the roof, maybe near 100%, when you ask people whether or not they know someone who's had a stroke or who's struggling with some other illness. And what John said is really, in that first opening, crystallized what his campaign is about. Struggling communities who need somebody in Washington who's actually fighting for them. Communities all across Blair County, across Center County, communities in Johnstown, people who know what it's like, who have a loved one maybe who's suffering with substance abuse, or who's seen businesses close on their main streets, in their Elm Streets. John is somebody who gets it. He's experienced it, and I've heard him say it on the campaign trail, that, you know, he already, you know, had empathy as a mayor of a town that was struggling, but this stroke has helped him have a level of empathy to what Pennsylvanians are dealing with than anybody else in this race. It was powerful to see him stand up there for 1 hour, talk about what was at stake. Of course, there were stumbles that he had, and he let folks know at the top that we would see those stumbles, but he stood strong. He talked about what he believes, and I think tonight, people who are on the fence are going to say, hey, even if John mushed 2 words together, what he didn't mush together is whether or not he is going to be for working people or for corporations. He's going to be for working people every single time, and you hear that passion in his opening statement.
And Jeff, I think, you know, we kind of talked about whether or not Dr. Oz was going to make this a focal point or not. He seemed to step back on the health issue. He did talk about the medical records later and brought that up, which is a point that the moderators also brought up. How do you think Mr. Fetterman fared in this?
Well, I think, you know, you asked me on the...
Because you've debated him as well.
Yeah, so you asked me on the pre-show, did I think that was going to be a major issue in the debate? Did I think Dr. Oz would bring it up? And I think what I said at the time, we can roll the tape, but I said, no, Mehmet's...
Roll it back.
Where's
replay?
Mehmet's running to solve big problems for the people of Pennsylvania. He's going to Washington to reach across the aisle, to bring balance, common sense, decency, compassion. You saw tonight. Look. And it's been well covered. John and I are good personal friends. John and Giselle are friends with me and Cheryl. So it's not, let's take the personalities out of it. Let's take sort of the interpersonal stuff even out of it. And you just saw tonight. A world where he was going to come out tonight and bore in on someone's health issue. He came tonight to talk about why he's running for Senate, his vision for Pennsylvania. And I do think, and I agree with Malcolm, like the contrast couldn't be clearer. And people who were on the fence tonight are going to look and see, if you want an optimistic, forward-looking, economic growth-focused, empowering people to take charge in their own lives, to live their American dream the way Dr. Oz and his family have, then he's your guy. If you want the government to be more involved in your life, if you want the government to get more involved, if you think we need more regulations, if you think that our energy industry is too profitable, as we heard tonight, which is crazy. I mean, if you look over the last 10 years, but fine. If you think those things, then I think you probably know where you're voting too. But I think the contrast couldn't have been clearer tonight.
Let's get to the economy, because that was a discussion point you guys wanted to dive into. They were asked about how to address inflation and high costs. Here was Dr. Oz on that.
If we've got 4% waste and fraud, we ought to be able to take care of that. John Fetterman's, however, response continually is to raise taxes. He raised taxes as mayor. He tried to raise taxes as a lieutenant governor, 46%. That's a big tax rate. He supported Joe Biden's recent tax rate increase.
So, Malcolm, you kind of took issue with the 4% fraud and waste line from Dr. Oz tonight.
You know, if I had a nickel for every time I heard a Republican say waste, fraud, and abuse, I'd have as much money as Dr. Oz does. Because What you saw tonight is that Dr. Oz is good at repeating a talking point. He's been practicing it for over 10 years on a TV show. He's not good at actually providing, solutions. Jeff is being far too charitable in terms of Dr. Oz laying out a vision tonight. What you saw him do is what he's done this entire campaign. Pick a word and repeat that word over and over and over again without having any solution. Cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, that has nothing to do with lowering the cost for people at the pump. And when he also made this point about John raised taxes as mayor, it shows that this is a guy who knows nothing about Pennsylvania and certainly nothing about Braddock. The mayor of Braddock can only break a tie with the city council. The city council votes. The mayor of Braddock can only come in to break a tie. And so this idea that John raised taxes is really nonsense. And this idea that Dr. Oz has any real plan on how to tackle inflation is equally nonsensical. We need to deal with tackling inflation. It is hurting, as John said, it is a tax on working class Americans, but the way we deal with it is dealing with the price gouging that we've seen. You don't have to believe Malcolm. You just look at the data out there. Companies are benefiting hand over fist, shooting corporate profits through the roof, including in the energy sector. And as our supply chains have healed during the height of COVID, we know that that was one of the initial drivers of inflation, were supply chain issues because of the pandemic. As those supply chains have gotten fixed, customers have not felt that reduction at the supermarket. They haven't felt it at the gas station. They haven't felt it in a lot of the hard costs that families have in terms of the cost of childcare. Instead, those costs have gone up in many instances because corporations have sought to pad their pockets instead of passing along those savings to customers as they should. And that is the biggest driver of inflation. I'm happy John made that point tonight.
And I'm going to let you respond here. Let's hear from John Fetterman on that point exactly.
Here's what I think we have to fight about inflation here right now. That's what we need to fight about inflation, right now, because it's a tax on working families, and Dr. Oz can't possibly understand what that is like. He has 10 gigantic mansions. We must push back against corporate greed. We must make sure that we're also pushing back against price gouging as well, too.
That was kind of a key point with Mr. Fetterman tonight. He related almost every issue back on the credibility and relatability of Dr. Oz and the normal everyday Pennsylvanian. What is your response to the issue? They say it's price gouging. They say it's corporations making huge profits off of inflation.
Yeah,
your response?
Well, so first of all, John Fetterman is the lieutenant governor in an administration that wanted to raise Pennsylvania's income tax by 46%. So if John was getting around the Commonwealth and talking to everyday working families, he would know that here in Pennsylvania, if you raise the income tax, you have to raise the income tax on everybody. You can't just raise it on some. We have a flat tax here in Pennsylvania on income by our Constitution. So he was part of an administration that wanted to raise taxes on every Pennsylvanian. And so for him to say somehow that Dr. Oz is out of touch with Pennsylvanians, and at the same time he was part of an administration that shut us down, destroyed Main Street small businesses, destroyed our kids' education, and we're still feeling the after effects, and we will for another decade or more. That is completely out of touch with what's happening to everyday Pennsylvanians. Dr. Oz has traveled all over the Commonwealth for a year. He has talked to Pennsylvanians from all walks of life, from every religion, from every faith, from every color, from every community, and he has talked to them about the problems facing their communities, the problems that keep them up at night. What are the kitchen table issues? And he's been running a campaign on that. I mean, that's what he's been doing. In his town halls, he's answered every question from the press. This is a man who's been out there hearing from Pennsylvanians, listening carefully, and putting together plans to address the problems that are most burning for people here in Pennsylvania. And this idea somehow that we have to punish corporations, because that seems to be the plan. We're going to raise taxes and we're going to punish corporations. That's what corporations are the people who employ. I mean, corporations employ people. So we're going to punish corporations. What does that mean? We're going to put more regulations on them? We're going to take their profits? Well, what happens when they lose money? Do we give the money back? I mean, every year you hear Democrats, and it almost sounds like John Kerry or Michael Dukakis running, when they talk about gouging and price gouging in corporations. I mean, it could be 1988 again, or it could be 2004 again. There's nothing new under the sun when you hear this sort of bashing corporations, and the reason is they have no plan. By the way, the simple answer, and we saw this during the Trump administration, we saw reduce regulations, unleash economic prosperity, and people across the income sphere, but most importantly, people who are trying to climb the ladder from the bottom rung were the ones who benefited the most from getting government out of the way and letting businesses and employees and small businesses do what they do best.
I know we have to move on, but let me just say quickly.
Well, I wanted to ask you a follow-up on that.
Oh, yeah, please, go ahead.
So in the primary debate that you participated in, one of the topics was a wealth tax, and where would that be? Because the argument was, they said corporations aren't paying their fair share in taxes, or the wealthy Pennsylvanians aren't paying their fair share of taxes. That's part of the plan here, according to Mr. Fetterman. Can you expound on that and respond also to Jeff?
Well, I just want to say we can look at the facts and the figures on this. The largest job growth that we've seen from any modern president has come from a man with the name of Joe Biden from Scranton. Okay, so just look at the facts. Look at record low unemployment. That has happened under the Biden administration, not 3 years ago, because of the policies of this administration. What we've also seen with the Inflation Reduction Act, which Dr. Oz has said he would not have supported, a minimum tax of 15% on the biggest corporations. Almost 60 corporations paid $0. Some of the biggest corporations, $0 in taxes. Now, because of the Inflation Reduction Act, Democrats coming together, we're able to tax those corporations and along the way do things that Pennsylvanians know we desperately need. We need to lower the cost of prescription drugs for Pennsylvania seniors who've seen those costs go up. Because of a bill like the Inflation Reduction Act, that is now capped at $2,000 a year, and also the price of insulin capped at $35 for Medicaid recipients. And so we're in a position right now where the only folks who've been focused on actually lowering costs for Americans have been Democrats who passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which every single Republican has voted against, which Dr. Oz would have also voted against. And you have but to look at the corporate prices, how they have not matched their real costs. The prices that corporations are forcing average Pennsylvanians to pay are completely out of line with what they're paying for those goods and services. I think about multiple CEOs who've gone on CNBC and said they love inflation because it's allowed them to raise prices. Not my words, the words of major Fortune 500 CEOs who are using inflation, which started because of the pandemic, which started because of Putin's reckless war in Ukraine. They have used that to punish Americans. And Jeff said, you know, Democrats want to punish corporations. If you think paying workers is punishing corporations, then we just have a big disagreement. I don't think lowering prices for Pennsylvanians, raising the standard of living for workers is punishing corporations. It's about them paying their fair share.
Malcolm, you know this too. And we have more open positions in the United States than we have people applying for positions. So no one's running around punishing workers. Now, I will also say, if the Democrats' closing argument in this Senate race, which is likely to decide the balance of power in the U.S. Senate, if their closing argument is Joe Biden is doing an amazing job on the economy, and the economy is booming, and everyone should be really excited by the record low unemployment, then if that's the closing argument, then I'm going to be making my reservations to celebrate with my friend Dr. Oz in Washington in early January, because that's absurd. I'm not calling you absurd, but I'm calling the argument absurd. People are hurting. Inflation is wrecking families. Companies can't find employees. No matter what they're paying, they can't find employees.
Now, real quick, because it was kind of lumped into this topic, energy. The issue of fracking was brought up, and I'm thinking back on the answers that were given. I'm not sure if we really got a clear stance from John Fetterman on fracking, because he was asked, previously he said he wasn't for fracking, and then they asked him about it, and he said he's always been for fracking, and then they were asked to clarify that, and he kind of froze a little bit on that. So where do you think? Do you have an answer? Where does John Fetterman stand on fracking and energy?
I think people will watch the debate, but I will say this, that the moderators pointed to conflicting statements that they both made on this issue. Dr. Oz is a doctor. He has said previously to deciding to running for U.S. Senate, he said that the health impacts of fracking need to be understood before any new fracking is done. Dr. Oz said that. Now he's saying something different. And so ultimately, if we want to lower costs at the pump, we need to take on corporate price gouging. Democrats passed the bill in the House to deal with that, to deal with price gouging from big oil and gas companies. Nearly every Republican voted against it, and then they come out here and tell you how much they want to lower costs at the pump, and yet they stood in the way of us actually lowering those costs. And so, John has been, talking about his position on this issue, and I think that we need to make sure these big oil and gas companies actually pass on the savings that they've seen in terms of the cost of crude oil to the regular consumer.
Jeff, I want to ask you on this. The argument from Dr. Oz has been the energy sector is the way to create more jobs and help the economy, that we have all these resources, but we're not able to drill on this land. The Biden administration have answered questions on this, and they said the permits are out there. If you wanted to drill, you can drill. It's there. So is there more opportunity, less opportunity? What's going on in the fracking industry?
So first of all, and we'll put a second bet here because we got the Eagles Steelers bet going already.
Okay.
We're gonna layer on a parlay there that the moment on fracking, where John's quote and then his other quote and then his really inability to answer and kind of join those two, and the freeze that we saw, because there is no way to join those two, that is going to be a commercial or multiple commercials that you're going to be seeing maybe as early as tomorrow. Now, I have no inside information on that, but that is clear to me. Like the defining moment in the debate, in my opinion, was that moment where John really looked Pennsylvanians in the eye and had no answer for what is our number one resource here in Pennsylvania in terms of natural resources. Of course, our number one resource here in Pennsylvania are our people. But our people can't live their full potential and really realize what they hope for and dream for themselves and their families if we don't have vibrant communities across all 67 counties. And the pathway forward in the very near term and through the next 10 to 15 years is to have a vibrant energy industry. Downstream from that are all sorts of industries. The cracker plant in Beaver County is a perfect example of economic ingenuity and growth. It's going to power all sorts of industry around Beaver County and in Western Pennsylvania, and your viewers know that. In terms of refresh me again, the question you asked specifically about what Dr. Oz said?
So Dr. Oz says the way to open the economy is through energy jobs and
Yeah,
allowing
that's
fracking, where the president's press secretary answered this question that there is opportunity to frack, that the permits are out there.
So the Biden administration, when they came into office, put a moratorium on drilling on federal lands. Fine. So they did that, and now we're in a situation where we have taken our Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is a national security asset of this country. The Biden administration has taken our Strategic Petroleum Reserve to the lowest levels it's ever been at. The lowest levels it's ever been at. And we're going to have to replenish those 600-700 million barrels of oil that we've taken out of it. We're going to have to replenish that at record high prices. At the same time, the Biden administration, this is their foreign policy, is going to Iran and Venezuela and asking them and finding out ways that we can perhaps lower the sanctions on these terrorist regimes who mean harm to Americans and ask them to meet the shortfall. So no, we are not harnessing all of our resources here in the United States or in Pennsylvania. And I think we only need to look at Europe. Germany is going to have a very cold winter. Britain is going to have a very cold winter. There are going to be rolling blackouts all over Europe. That is the future here in America if we don't get our heads out of our rear ends and take advantage of the resources that we have here and move our country forward.
A part of what you're hearing here and the sort of Republican ideology around this is that we don't have other resources, including renewable resources, including expanding things like nuclear, which we know don't have the same input in terms of CO2 and other byproducts. What we have seen from this administration, the president says when he hears the words clean energy, he hears good green energy jobs. And when you saw with the Inflation Reduction Act, you had Boilermakers, IBEW, all these folks supporting the major investments, historic investments into not just remediation of acid mine runoff that we're seeing up in places in Scranton that's poisoning our streams, to deal with so many of the uncapped wells that we need to cap, but also building electric charging stations all around, dealing with energy efficiency so that families who want to conserve their energy and be smart, especially folks with older homes in places like Philadelphia, we have a really old housing stock. It was not affordable to, put a solar panel or just deal with energy efficiency around the windows, which allow people to use less energy in the first place. What's happening right now internationally with OPEC and others is that Russia decided to wage and completely unprovoked war in Ukraine. We know the impact that that has had, and the president has, in these extraordinary circumstances, used the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to deal with that, to deal with the impact the pandemic has had. But what you're seeing from Dr. Oz, who said over and over again that the big oil companies don't trust John. Well, you know what? They don't trust John because they can't control John. John is exactly right. Dr. Oz has never found a big oil exec who he hasn't swiped right on, who he's not in love with, and who he won't own. John has made it clear his position on Pennsylvania Energy, but he's also made it clear that he does not accept big checks from these oil and gas companies. And I want to be very clear to folks watching. The same folks who are running these nasty ads about John that you're seeing after every Penn State game, these are the same jagoffs who are doing everything they can to fill the coffers of Dr. Oz, and who are going to be coming back to him and saying, hey, this is what we want in terms of repayment for all the money that we invested in this campaign. John is unbought by these industries, but he also understands, has been very clear about his position around our energy independence.
Now, another key topic was the issue of abortion, and Dr. Oz was asked to clarify his stance on that, and this is what he had to say.
There should not be involvement from the federal government in how states decide their abortion decisions. As a physician, I've been in the room when there's some difficult conversations happening. I don't want the federal government involved with that at all. I want women, doctors, local political leaders, letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive, to put the best ideas forward so states can decide for themselves.
So he was asked specifically about the Lindsey Graham bill, and he that was the answer, and he reiterated that answer, that he would not support on the federal level anything that would take away from the states, which if you apply that answer to Lindsey Graham bill, that would, but he didn't say yes or no. So why wouldn't he just say yes or no, I would not support the Lindsey Graham bill as presented?
Well, I think he said, he said with a complete sort of looking at, I don't believe the federal government should be involved in this at all. So that's Lindsey Graham's bill. It's any other bill that we brought up. It's what John wants to do, which is to bust the filibuster. And it was very naive of John, I believe, and I think genuinely believing that he could achieve this as a senator, but naive to think that you could bust the filibuster to codify Roe, but that you could somehow reinstate it or keep it from packing the court, adding 2 states, abolishing the Electoral College, or any other crazy idea that would radically and recklessly change this country. And
but
so
why on the issue, why continue the blanket statement? Why couldn't he, after he was asked, because they asked him once or twice and 3 times, and then he said, I've answered
Well,
this a couple
because
times.
people know his answer.
Well, by the way,
he could have just said no.
by the way, you got the answer.
But that was the answer I got.
You did. No, you did an interview with
I
him.
did, and that's the he kept saying federal level. So you apply it, sure, when you apply it, but I just don't know why he just wouldn't say no. Because that was you're right. That was the answer.
The clear
but he
answer
said
is, look, as a senator, what he said is, I will vote against any legislation where the federal government is telling the states what to do vis-a-vis abortion. Period.
So this is why he won't say yes or no for folks who are watching at home. The Senate majority PAC, Mitch McConnell's PAC, Lindsey Graham, and all of them are spending tons and tons of money to lie about John Fetterman. He needs that money to keep coming into the state. And so he won't give a straight answer on one of the most important issues that Pennsylvanians need a straight answer on. He just said, as a doctor, he's been in the room for very tough conversations. And to say that, so only a U.S. senator should not be in the room, but sure, have a state representative in the room, or have Doug Mastriano be in the room and decide whether or not during that tough conversation you can get an abortion or not, is why he can't give a clear answer. This, to me, along with his non-answer on what to do about inflation, is really the defining moment of this debate. Local leaders like myself also recognize that our place is not in the hospital room of a woman who is making one of the most difficult in many instances and private decisions that they can make on whether or not to terminate a pregnancy. Dr. Oz wants to have it every which way. He wants the support from the Trump base who supports a national ban, and yet he wants to present himself as this middle of the road, nice guy who just wants to stay out of it. Over and over again, Oz has pointed to state issues that John would not have oversight on as a senator and is saying John should answer. And now he won't say anything about this very important issue, which states in which his, not his running mate, but somebody he's on the same ticket with, Doug Mastriano, has said he would ban all abortion. Even in cases of rape or incest, he would ban all abortions. Lindsey Graham, he would not say yes or no on this issue. And so Dr. Oz has it all wrong on this issue. No politician at the local level or at the federal level should be in the business of deciding for a woman what to do in this intimate, personal, and private decision.
So I will ask Jeff, what is the difference between a federal legislature making the decision versus a state legislature?
Well, so let's be clear. I mean, Malcolm made reference to ads and the ads that is supposedly lying about John. Just tonight, as we were watching the debate together, I must have seen 4 ads beforehand and 6 ads before that saying Dr. Oz trying to scare Pennsylvanians, women and men, young people, older people, everyone, scare them into believing that somehow Dr. Oz doesn't believe what he believes. And he's been very clear. He believes that this is a state issue. He also believes, as a physician, as a leader, that there should be exceptions to any legislation. And those exceptions are, of course, if the pregnancy is the result of rape, incest, or, of course, to protect the life of the mother. And so these ads that are running that say, I even saw an ad that said he doesn't believe in any exceptions. Well, that's just a complete lie. I believe it may be Senator Schumer's PAC. It's definitely one of the Democrat PACs. That's a complete lie. Just a pure out lie.
I just want to make this last point. When Dr. Oz was asked whether or not he supports Doug Mastriano, he said he supports the entire Republican ticket. Doug Mastriano has said his #1 priority as governor would be to ban all abortions, even in case of rape and incest, and would actually criminalize doctors, like Dr. Oz, I guess, who've been in the room with women making a tough decision. You can't have it every single way. If John Fetterman is responsible for every single thing that Joe Biden has done, then Dr. Oz has to be responsible for saying that he is going to vote for a leader at the state level who would ban abortion in all cases. And so you said you want to leave it to the state level, and the person you support to lead the state wants to ban all abortion. He couldn't draw that line. I'm drawing the line because the line is very clear.
Well, no, so you asked, why does he believe it should be left to the states? Well, the elected representatives of the state, and you've traveled all over the Commonwealth, I've traveled all over the Commonwealth. This is it's a deeply religious issue, it's a deeply personal issue. Of course it is. And the feelings in my hometown of my hometown of Reading, but where Cheryl and I have made our family in Montgomery County, the people view it very differently than they do out here in Blair County. And we all know that. And so this is a big, diverse state with lots and lots of different views on this issue, which is why Dr. Oz is saying quite practically, and by the way, this is a proud tradition in Pennsylvania of having common sense views on this very, very important issue and this very personal issue for people. Common sense view of this, which is the elected representatives of the people coming from all 4 corners, from all 67 counties, will make the wisest decision. We don't need 435 representatives in Washington and 100 senators in Washington making decisions for the whole country. That should be made by the elected representatives here in the Commonwealth in consultation, of course, with the administration, whoever that's going to be.
I want to play Mr. Fetterman's response on the issue of abortion.
I want to look into the face of every woman in Pennsylvania. If you believe that the choice of your reproductive freedom belongs with Dr. Oz, then you have a choice. But if you believe that the choice for abortion belongs between you and your doctor, that's what I fight for. Roe v. Wade, for me, should be the law.
Well, Roe versus Wade, right? That was the trimester. So first trimester, second trimester, third trimester. And I believe, I'm not a state legislator, but I believe that Pennsylvania allows abortion up to 24 weeks.
24 weeks.
24 weeks. And
run for state legislature.
Cheryl won't let me.
Are you announcing a campaign right now, Jeff?
We would get some stuff done together. I was saying.
Cheryl won't allow that.
Despite the disagreements, it sounds like
we would get some stuff done.
But let's be clear. John's talking about codifying Roe. And I think 24 weeks out of a 40, we have 2 girls. I recall that, that it wasn't a first trimester. I mean, there's 40 weeks in the gestation. So 24 weeks in Pennsylvania. That is the law in Pennsylvania today. I just think this is too important an issue to be scaring people, and to be running these ads scaring people into voting when they're clearly lying.
Well,
They're clearly
I
lying.
have to say this is a scary moment. When Roe was overturned, you saw state after state take away a freedom that women had known for over 50 years, and now they're seeing the clock roll backwards. And what our next United States Senator believes on this issue really matters. I heard Dr. Oz mention Bernie Sanders more times than I expected tonight, over and over again, saying that, you know, Bernie Sanders and John Fetterman are the same because John supported Bernie Sanders at some point, or Bernie supported John rather, that John is responsible for every position of Bernie Sanders. Well, you know what? Dr. Oz supports Doug Mastriano, who has the most extreme position, I believe, maybe in the country, on abortion of anybody running for governor. Dr. Oz says he wants this decision to be left to state leaders. The state leaders that Dr. Oz supports wants to ban abortion. And so he can try to walk away from this, but what is clear is that Dr. Oz, in his own words, believes that all abortion is murder. John Fetterman disagrees with him. I disagree with him. I think most Pennsylvanians disagree with him. I think that everybody has to look at this answer and recognize that Dr. Oz is not fit to be our U.S. Senator and that John Fetterman should be.
I want to move on to something that kind of transitions here. We're running a little bit out of time, but I want to get to the issue of healthcare. And also, Dr. Oz was criticized about and asked about the products that were on his show, and he answered that question right here.
Sold weight loss products as described in those commercials. It's a television show, like this is a television show, so people can run commercials on the shows, and that's a perfectly appropriate and very transparent process. I ruffled a lot of feathers on my show because I told people the truth, and I'm proud of that. I'll do the exact same thing as a U.S. Senator. But there's no way to defend what John Fetterman has done with socialized medicine. That is a radical departure from what we in America have accepted.
I
A
must
relationship
respond
between
to
your
that.
John, you'll have your turn. John, let me
I
finish.
must respond to that.
There must be a relationship between a doctor and a patient, and that's what I would direct patients to do.
Thank you, Mr.
And obviously, there was a disagreement there about healthcare, and John Fetterman got to answer that question right here.
I never supported any of that thing. You know, he keeps talking about Bernie Sanders. You know, 3 years ago, he was on his show and he hugged him and he said, "I love this guy." You know what? Why don't you pretend that you live in Vermont instead of Pennsylvania and run against Bernie Sanders? Because all you can do is talk about Bernie Sanders, because my truth is that healthcare is a basic fundamental right. And I believe in expanding that. And I believe about supporting, fighting for healthcare, the kind of healthcare that saved my life.
Okay, so I want to get a clarification from you, Mr. Kenyatta, because in the primary campaign there was an argument about universal health care and whether it was viable, and you know, in the past it seems that John Fetterman would support universal health care and Medicare for all, which is a Bernie Sanders, you know, proposition as well. So he said, I didn't agree with all those things. He agrees with expanding. So does he support Medicare for all, or doesn't he? Where is he landing?
Well, I think we need to clarify. Universal health care is everybody having health care. That's not the same as Medicare for all.
Okay.
You could have universal health care with private insurance. What John has said is he supports what the president has said he supports, which is a public option where people right now, if you have insurance with your employer, you don't like it, then you can join this public option, or you can keep your employer-based coverage. But every person who makes under a certain threshold, people right now who qualify for Medicare and Medicaid, would automatically be enrolled in this public health option. But by having that expanded base, we can build on the work that was done in the Inflation Reduction Act, where Medicare now for the first time can negotiate drug prices, which is a really exciting thing to do. I thought this was actually one of John's funniest and maybe his best retort in this debate. Dr. Oz has said Bernie Sanders, Bernie Sanders, Bernie Sanders. I've seen a lot of ads putting their faces together, and that's why I made the point that I made, about abortion when we were talking about that. What John recognizes is that no Pennsylvania should worry about whether or not they can go to the doctor when they're not feeling well or go bankrupt because they get sick. They should have health care. And here in Pennsylvania, with Penny, the bipartisan insurance state-based insurance marketplace that has lowered costs for people. Medicare recipients are going to see the costs go down. We have done this because of the investments and the policies that we've seen come out of Democratic caucus, not out of Republican caucus.
Malcolm made reference before to fitness to be a United States Senator. I just want to come back to that for a second.
Okay.
I mean, we have a world-renowned cardiothoracic surgeon who is the son of immigrants, right? First-generation American, dad born on the dirt floor in Turkey, came to this country to be a physician at a time that we needed physicians here in the United States and really needed to bring people in who were well-trained. Father came here, built an amazing life. Mehmet has taken that and built an incredible business. I mean, he went to the Wharton School at the same time in medical school. And when you meet people in the healthcare field, even when they're Democrats, and even when they're not voting for him, I mean, I remember I live in Montgomery County. There's a lot of Democrats who aren't voting Republican in this election, but they will acknowledge that he is one of the most talented surgeons, one of the most talented physicians, and a brilliant man. And so I think, in terms of qualifications, who's fit to be a United States Senator, there's no question that Mehmet Oz would go to the Senate in January and not only be a national leader on healthcare issues, but Pennsylvanians would be proud to be sending one of the smartest, kindest, most decent people that I've ever had the privilege to know and meet, and certainly work with in the political world. He would be an amazing senator for all Pennsylvanians. And you heard that tonight, time and time again, an optimistic vision for the future. What Pennsylvanians can do, reaching across the aisle. You didn't hear once from John, not once from John about reaching across the aisle, working with the other side, finding common ground. Mehmet must have mentioned it at least 10 times. Working with the Democrats, working with moderates, working with independents, finding common ground, and doing what Pennsylvania has always done. From the founding of the nation to today, we have led the nation forward. We are a common sense, principled, decent people. That is Pennsylvania. And I think Mehmet Oz will be a fantastic senator for all Pennsylvanians.
Okay, so folks, we are out of time because we have to get ready for the 11 o'clock news, where the folks who are in the viewing area of WTAJ will see these faces once again, and we break down a couple more issues for you as we do the 11 o'clock news. And of course, you'll have a full debate recap on your stations at home as well, so make sure you tune in at 11 for that. Jeff Bardos, thank you so much for taking the time. Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, thank you so much for being here. Look at that! We have handshakes with disagreements, and
I'm
we're
trying
going
to get him to run for state office.
Look at that. I think he just offered to be his campaign manager.
Oh, I did not do that for the record.
For the record, okay, we'll put that out there.
Cheryl won't allow it. She loves you, but no. I'm not allowed to run.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. From your local election headquarters, I'm Jordan Tracy in Altoona.